A roundtable discussion to assess the extent to which South Africa, both at a state and societal level, has embraced the constitutional vision of social justice was held today. It focused on evaluating progress and identifying existing gaps and considering whether there is a need to strengthen or clarify the constitutional commitment to social justice. It brought together a diverse group of participants, including academics, policymakers, legal practitioners, judges, civil society representatives and state-based researchers. And director of the Centre for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University and former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, formed part of that discussion. Now she joins us live via our video link. Prof, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. Now, you took part in a very important conversation that took place this evening, ended about 30 minutes ago. Perhaps maybe let's start off here. What are your biggest takeaways from that roundtable discussion?
Well, firstly, thank you, Mbali. Greetings to viewers. I think the main takeaway was that most people think that the Constitution has been useful and that it has made a difference, broadly speaking. However, there are many people who are left behind, particularly when it comes to issues such as hunger, poverty, and extreme structural inequality.
And often, I mean, we are always told that South Africa has the best constitution, if not in the world. And, you know, looking at this and reviewing this constitution, how important and how necessary is it for us as a country to go back and see if maybe there could be any changes to it?
It is extremely important. I think one of the speakers, Alex Matole, reminded us that the goodness of a constitution can only be seen in improved human lives. And much as our Minister of Justice gave us a sense that a lot of good laws have been passed, but it is important that we see progress on all fronts in people's lives. And therefore, this idea of reviewing a constitution annually gives people an opportunity to look at, have the assumptions that underpinned the provisions in the Constitution proven to be true, or there were wrong assumptions about human behavior, or else things have changed and therefore the Constitution needs to be tweaked a bit so that it meets people where they are and it does change lives meaningfully.
And looking at issues around social justice, something that you touched on a bit earlier on, what would you say were the most important nuggets that came out, from those taking place or those in the discussion which took place today? And some were saying that, well, maybe it's time for us to sort of review some of the aspects in our constitution.
Absolutely. I think the most important takeaway about social justice was that it is a goal in the preamble to the Constitution, where the Constitution says we are adopting it to heal the divisions of the past and establish a society based on social justice, among other things. So it's only in the preamble, but it's not replicated in the values. It's not replicated in the Bill of Rights. And as Justice Albisek and the Minister said, the courts had interpreted the Constitution to say social justice is a value that should underpin or should be invoked in all decisions by government, by the courts, and by everyone else. But that's not happening. And therefore, the question that was asked in the room was, should we perhaps go back to the Constitution and make express that everything that is done in this country should be subjected to a social justice lens or test before it is done.
And just looking at public participation, I mean, often every year, South Africans are always asked to get involved when it comes, them expressing themselves in the Constitution and what they would like. And often we find that, a number of people are not even familiar with the fact that there's an annual process that is done to review the Constitution. Why is it important for South Africans to get involved and to be part of the reviewing of the Constitution?
it is important so that people can distinguish between whether it's the Constitution that is getting in the way of progress to ensure fairness to all, or it's human behavior that is getting in the way. And I'm glad that you have mentioned that. There's so many people, and we discussed this during the roundtable, who are saying, tear the Constitution, get rid of democracy because our lives are not improving. But when you get closer to it, and Minister Momoluko Kubai and Justice Albie Sachs said, actually, the Constitution provides for these things. And therefore, perhaps the problem does not lie in the Constitution, it lies in non-implementation. And therefore, people would not know if the problem lies in the Constitution or non-implementation if they don't participate in these conversations. And I'm glad you're giving us this opportunity, because people need to know that this window is open for people to engage with the Constitution. And if they really think there are changes that should be made in the Constitution, this is the time to say what exactly should change.
And as we near, closer to the time where, public consultations will close, what are your expectations of this process? So what do you think needs to be prioritized as, this comes to a close?
Well, I hope people just prioritize giving Parliament a sense of what have been their experiences under the Constitution, 31 years in 31 years of democracy. And secondly, where are the gaps and what needs to be done? For example, there was a cry about implementation. And so one of the proposals at the meeting was that there should be a provision in the Constitution that forces government to implement its laws within a particular timeline. For example, Chapter 5 of the Equality Act has been lying dormant for 25 years. We knew when we took off in democracy that we inherited inequality. And therefore, the Act had two parts: anti-discrimination, which is dealing with random discrimination. But the equality part, the promotion of equality part, was about understanding that there's systemic and structural inequality, and measures need to be taken to remove that systemic and structural inequality. And therefore, we haven't done that systematically. Fortunately, I've heard that the Department of Justice is going to prioritize that process. But what we want to make sure is that from now onwards, the president has a specified timeline to decide, do I want to implement this law or do I not want to implement this law? And if he doesn't want to implement this law, to go back to Parliament. For example, with the Public Protector's decision on the Executive Members Ethics Act, the president has 14 days to tell the Public Protector what he plans to do. So why should the Public Protector be senior to Parliament? I mean, I have been Public Protector, so it was good for us. But we think the same provision should be for Parliament. And then the second thing, the status of social justice should be clarified. Is it a value? Is it a goal? Is it a right?
And maybe now that we have you with us and discussing issues around the Constitution and talking about Chapter 25 of the Constitution, what do you make of the narrative of the Expropriation Act, which has now been signed into law, and with some saying, or this narrative being peddled, with some saying that land will be forcefully removed from people, and this stemming from what took place, obviously, this week in the White House?
Well, we know that the White House encounter was underpinned by lies about the fact that the state is expropriating land without compensation from anyone. It's not doing so. Lies about the fact that the law is going to expropriate land from only white people. That's a lie. Lies that land will be expropriated without any process. And the Act is very clear about the fact that the starting point will be to go with a process where people are encouraged to let go of land in specific circumstances. And Section 25 is very clear. It makes a provision for restitution of land to those whose land was taken away by law unjustly. from 1913, but it also makes provision in Section 25(5) for the state to redistribute land. 72% of land currently is in white hands, when whites are only 7.5% of the population. And by any standards, that's unfair. So we would like people to make submissions, whether they are black, white, young, old, rich, or poor, to say what's their own approach to how the Constitution should deal with land redistribution, employment opportunity redistribution, economic opportunity redistribution, because surely we have to redress the imbalances of the past if we want a peaceful country. And that's why the concept of social justice was invented in 1843 under Catholic social thought. It was in a society where some are treated unjustly, exploited and oppressed, you cannot have peace.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time. That's Professor Thuli Madonsela there, just speaking to us about the process which is underway, the annual reviewing of the country's constitution.